You stopped chasing, you stopped explaining. You stopped holding space for someone who refused to show up with both feet and a full heart. And now, the silence is growing louder. But not for you, for him. Because the feminine silence doesn't mean absence. It means return. Return to her wholeness, her clarity, her truth. And in that stillness, the masculine can finally hear everything he's been avoiding. Not the words, but the vibration beneath them. He feels the void where your energy used to reach for him. He feels the shift where your frequency no longer bends to hold his confusion. He feels the truth, even if he doesn't yet have the courage to face it. Because silence is not empty. It's confrontational. And what he's starting to realize is this: you're not on pause anymore. You're not holding your breath waiting for a call. You're not scanning the sky for signs of his arrival. You're not dreaming of the version of him who could someday love you right. You're living, you're anchoring. You're becoming the woman who no longer needs to be chosen because she already chose herself. And that is what's forcing his soul to awaken. Not your words, not your pain, but your absence. Your silence now says what your voice no longer needs to, and it speaks directly to the version of him who's still hiding. The version who ran from your light. The version who wanted your love, but feared what it would change in him. But the field is shifting, and whether he's ready or not, he's about to feel what it means to face you. Not the you who begged for clarity, not the you who tried to be more patient, more soft, more understanding, but the you who no longer plays small for love. This version of you doesn't wait. She aligns. And when the feminine aligns, the masculine is pulled toward truth, not comfort. That's the real awakening. And now, he's being called to step into the very space you once tried to make safe for him. He's being asked to choose, not just love, but courage. To show up, to speak what he's never said, to feel what he's avoided, to face you, not to win you back, but to finally meet you in truth. Because the silence isn't going to last forever. It's only here to show him the cost of his hiding. And soon, he'll have to break it, or be broken by it. The masculine always thought your voice was the message, but it was your silence that became the truth. You once tried to explain your heart in 1,000 ways, through texts, glances, prayers, dreams. You tried to be patient. You waited through confusion. You held his energy through storms. You forgave his distance, justified his fear, softened your light so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed by what he hadn't yet become. And now, you've stopped. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because your spirit simply stopped resonating with half presence. You didn't decide to silence your soul. You decided to stop overextending it. Because silence isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of self. And when the divine feminine enters stillness, something ancient activates in the field. The masculine doesn't hear your silence like a void. He hears it like a mirror that reflects everything he's been avoiding. His longing, his fear, his guilt, his delay. He feels what used to be effortless. Your energy, your presence, your hope begin to fade. Not into darkness, but into sovereignty. And sovereignty feels different. It doesn't reach out. It doesn't chase. It doesn't seek validation through his choices. It becomes magnetic, unmovable, undeniable, unshakable. And here's the shift. He feels it. He may not understand it yet. He may not know why your name keeps circling his mind, why he wakes in the middle of the night with a chest full of weight, why your silence feels heavier than your love ever did. But it's because you're no longer holding the emotional thread between you. You laid it down. You unhooked your worth from his recognition. You unbound your timelines from his uncertainty. You released the sacred cord from the grip of fear. And now, all that's left is stillness. But stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. Stillness is sacred ground. Stillness is the void before rebirth. Stillness is where the masculine finally confronts what he was never ready to see when you were still dancing around his shadows, trying to keep the connection alive. Have you noticed? You no longer crave to explain yourself. You no longer check signs to see if he'll return. You no longer feel like your world is on pause. Instead, you're noticing your body again. You're dreaming different dreams. You're holding your own heart without reaching for someone else to fill it. That's not detachment, that's embodiment. And embodiment is what turns silence into revelation. Because the truth is, you were never meant to convince him. You were meant to become. And becoming requires space. Not silence as punishment, but silence as initiation. Because when you stop speaking to someone who isn't listening, you start hearing yourself. And when the feminine starts listening to her own soul, she no longer bends for love. She expands in it. That's what's happening now. And it's shifting him. He can't feel you like he used to. And that's not a threat. That's the natural consequence of staying too long in indecision. You've stopped feeding the cord. You've stopped fueling the fantasy. You've stopped filling the space he refused to claim. And now, the space feels like pressure to him because the feminine's stillness doesn't erase the connection. It reveals who was truly invested in its growth. So what is he seeing now? He's seeing that you no longer orbit around his silence. He's seeing that your love wasn't dependence, it was devotion. And he's realizing that your devotion was a gift he assumed would never leave. But it's not that you've left. It's that you've stopped anchoring where he won't arrive. You've moved your energy into the present. You've stopped living in what if. You've returned to your own temple. And now, the question is not whether he will come back. The question is, can he face you now that you no longer need him to? Because the feminine who stands in her stillness is not cold, she's clear. And clarity has always been the masculine's greatest test and deepest invitation. So if he comes back now, he will not find the same woman. He will not find the one waiting to be chosen. He will find a mirror that will show him not only who you've become, but who he must now choose to be, without excuses, without illusions, without delay, because stillness is not forever, but it is final in one sense. You will never again lose yourself in the noise of someone who can't face the truth. He can feel that now. And whether he understands it fully or not, your silence has already done what your words never could. It called him forward, and now the mirror is in front of him. At first, he thought your silence was space. He thought it meant he had more time. More time to figure himself out. More time to explore the world without consequence. More time to return when he felt ready. But that was before the silence started speaking to him. Before it became a pressure in his chest. Before it crept into his thoughts without invitation. before it echoed through every moment of his day in ways he couldn't name or explain. You see, the divine masculine doesn't always hear the messages through words. He hears them through absence, through energy, through contrast. And when the feminine, the lighthouse, the signal, the living invitation goes still, he begins to feel everything he pushed away. Not just you, but himself. Because without your energy to orbit around, he must finally sit with his own. And it's in that emptiness that he begins to feel the weight. At first, he doesn't know what it is. He tells himself he's just tired, overwhelmed, distracted. But deep down, something heavier is pressing against him. The memory of you. Not just what you said, but how you made him feel safe in a world that taught him to stay guarded. Not just the love you gave, but the version of himself that only came alive in your presence. And now, that version feels lost. Because you're no longer feeding it. You're no longer being the emotional oxygen he didn't know he was breathing. And as your stillness grows, so does the silence within him. It gets louder at night. It rises in the morning. It lingers in the spaces where you once filled the air with light. He feels it in his gut when he sees your name, but doesn't text. He feels it when songs sound different, when dreams feel more vivid, when something ordinary triggers something sacred. Because energy doesn't lie. And yours is no longer available in the same way. Not because you stopped loving him, but because you stopped carrying him. And that is what he never thought would happen. Because the masculine often confuses the feminine's endurance with permanence. He assumes that because she's always been there, she always will be. But stillness isn't a game. It's not manipulation. It's a sacred reclaiming. And when the feminine steps back, the masculine is forced to step in, to himself. But that's where the pain begins. Because for the first time, he has to feel it all. The missed chances, the unsent messages, the moments he felt her presence and chose fear anyway. He remembers the look in her eyes when she still believed in them. He remembers the softness in her voice when she tried one last time to explain what this was. He remembers the way she used to wait, not because she was weak, but because she loved without limits. And now, those memories come with weight, because they're no longer just moments. They're losses. And this is what no one tells the masculine, that her silence will be the most powerful sound he ever hears. Because silence is where he hears his own soul for the first time. It's where he realizes that her absence is not a punishment. It's a mirror. A mirror of every time he didn't choose, every time he didn't act, every time he stayed silent while she was giving him everything. And now, the roles have reversed. She is the one in silence. She is the one choosing herself. She is the one anchored in truth. And he is the one feeling the pull. But the pull no longer comes with comfort. It comes with accountability. It comes with the ache of knowing she still exists, but may no longer be accessible in the same way. So what does he do? He tries to numb it with distraction, with logic, with denial. But nothing fits. Because the silence doesn't leave. It lingers, it waits, not for him, but within him. And every time he tries to silence it, it only grows. Because what he's feeling is not just her absence, it's the divine feminine's echo. And echoes don't fade until they're answered. So here's what begins to happen. He starts to dream of her. He sees her in strangers. He hears her laugh in places she's never been. He feels her energy when he's alone, when he least expects it, when his defenses are low, because the energy never really leaves, it just changes form. And the form it has taken now? It's the mirror of his delay. It's the consequence of not choosing when love was present. It's the invitation he ignored, now returning as the lesson he must face. And it's heavy, but not to hurt him, to awaken him, to shake him out of the illusion that love can wait forever, to teach him that the feminine is not an infinite well. She is a sacred current, and when that current flows elsewhere, he must learn to swim. So if you've been silent, if you've stepped back, if you've reclaimed your energy not in bitterness, but in clarity, know this, he feels it. Not just in thoughts, but in his nervous system, in his dreams, in the pit of his stomach, in the ache of a memory that won't leave him alone. You became the mirror the moment you stopped being the net. And now he must decide. Will he face what he sees? Or will he let the silence become permanent? Because one thing is certain, the feminine no longer waits, and the weight he feels, it's the cost of that realization. There comes a moment in every twin flame journey when something subtle, yet irreversible, happens. Not a conversation, not an argument, not even a choice made in the physical world, but a shift, a vibrational shift so profound that the divine masculine, who has long resisted facing himself, can no longer look away. This is the shift you've been feeling, divine feminine. The moment when your energy no longer bends to carry his, when your field stops compensating for his delay, when your light, once soft and open, like a flame waiting to be cupped, becomes untouchable, like the sun that cannot be reached without being transformed. It's not punishment, it's polarity. You didn't mean to pull away. You simply aligned. You stopped holding on to versions of him that never arrived. You stopped negotiating your needs in exchange for breadcrumbs of potential. You stopped whispering in the dark, hoping he would finally answer. And when you did that, the energy snapped. Not in anger, but in truth. And that truth is what he's starting to feel. At first, it stirs as discomfort, a sudden restlessness, a tension in his chest when your name crosses his mind, a strange pressure in his stomach when he sees something that reminds him of you. But it's not just nostalgia. It's not just missing you. It's the vibration of a mirror now held up to his soul. Because your energy no longer makes space for illusions. And when the feminine no longer matches the frequency of confusion, the masculine is forced to meet his own clarity, or be broken by its absence. This is the shift that forces him to look, not with his eyes, but with his soul, because everything around him begins to feel different. Things that once distracted him now feel empty. The silence that once brought peace now feels like a confrontation. The faces he once entertained no longer reflect anything real. Because the place in him that only you touched has gone cold. And nothing fills it anymore. This isn't because you're withholding love. It's because you stopped leaking it. And without that energetic lifeline, he is finally being forced to breathe on his own. But here's the twist. That breath feels foreign, unnatural, heavy. Because he doesn't just miss you. He misses who he was when you believed in him. And now, with your energy withdrawn from the pattern, he's left with himself. his silence, his delays, his detours, his inability to choose when the door was open. And now, the door has changed shape. It's not closed in anger. It's evolved in frequency. You didn't walk away, you rose. And rising doesn't chase, it magnetizes. But magnetism only works on what is ready. And what he's feeling now is the consequence of his unreadiness. Because the universe doesn't wait for the masculine to become ready. It aligns with truth. And truth has a schedule. So when you stepped into your alignment, when you said enough, not out of bitterness, but from peace, the universe responded. Your frequency changed, your purpose sharpened, your boundaries softened in form, but strengthened in vibration. And now, the masculine is colliding with that vibration. Not because you sent a message, not because you made a demand, but because everything in your field has changed. And his soul can feel it. It feels it when he scrolls through your photos and realizes they carry a new glow. It feels it when he thinks about texting you and something inside him stalls. It feels it when he sees you in a dream and realizes, she's not waiting for me anymore. That realization is the crack, and through that crack, the truth floods in. It shows him who he's been and who he could have been. It shows him how often he doubted the one thing that never doubted him, your love. It shows him the space you once held and how sacred it really was. And that's when the regret begins, not because he lost access to your attention, but because he lost access to the version of himself that only awakened in your presence. He begins to feel what you always felt, the pain of being unseen, the ache of loving someone who couldn't meet you there, the fatigue of being ready in a moment where the other person still clings to delay. And now, the roles have reversed. You are no longer the one carrying the burden. He is. You are no longer the one questioning if it was real. He is. You are no longer the one asking, well, when will he finally see? Because he does. Now. And that sight changes everything. Because he's not just looking at you anymore. He's looking at the void he created by not rising. He's looking at the version of you that evolved without needing his approval. He's looking at the path you now walk alone, not in loneliness, but in truth. And for the first time, he realizes, if he wants to join you there, he must rise too. No more hiding, no more excuses, no more pretending that this journey is only about timing or destiny or signs. This is about choice, courage, alignment. And the shift in your energy is the final invitation. Not to win you back, but to face himself. Because this journey was never about reunion at all. It was about evolution. And now, the only way forward is through the truth he's avoided, through the silence he's filled with distraction, through the love that still lingers in his bones, but no longer comforts him. Because love, real love, doesn't wait. It awakens. And your awakening, divine feminine, has become the flame he can't ignore. No matter how far he runs, no matter how quiet he stays, no matter how late he finally looks. Why you're no longer the one who waits. There was a time when waiting felt sacred, when your heart sat quietly by the door, trusting that one day he'd arrive, not just in body, but in truth, in courage, in presence. And so, you waited. not passively, but with your whole being. You lit candles in your soul. You held space in your prayers. You watered a garden he didn't yet see. But something has changed, not because you stopped loving, not because you gave up, but because your soul received a deeper truth. You were never meant to wait for him, you were meant to rise. The old feminine template taught you that devotion meant patience without end, that love meant holding space until someone decided you were finally enough, that your worth was proven through endurance. But your soul remembered something older, something truer, that you are not here to stand still while another soul circles their awakening. You are here to move, to embody, to become. And that knowing, that quiet sovereign knowing, is why you're no longer the one who waits. Because waiting became a cage dressed up as devotion. And while your heart is infinite, your time here is not. You came with a mission, a voice, a flame. You came to anchor truth, not to delay it for the comfort of another. So what happened? You outgrew the loop of hoping he'd show up different this time, the loop of decoding mixed signals, the loop of feeling his energy, but not his effort, the loop of believing that if you just held on a little longer, he'd finally catch up. But love does not bloom in loops. Love blooms in forward movement, in self-honoring, in alignment. And that's where you are now, in alignment. Not with his timeline, but with your own. Not with his uncertainty, but with your clarity. Not with his silence, but with your sovereignty. Because the truth is, you were never actually waiting for him. You were waiting for you to remember who you are. And now that you have, something unhooks. The ache softens. The pull dissolves. The endless when loses its grip on your chest. And suddenly, you are not the woman who waits. You are the woman who knows. Knows that union, if it is to come, will never be built on delay. Knows that the masculine's true arrival cannot be forced. It must be chosen. Knows that chasing an awakening for him only costs you your own. So instead, you surrender. Not in defeat, but in reclamation. You take your hands off the timeline. You stop rereading the past. You stop trying to decode what his silence means this time. Because it doesn't matter anymore, not in the way it used to. What matters now is your alignment, your joy, your peace, your expansion. Because love isn't proven in how long you can wait. It's revealed in how deeply you can trust the path, even when it takes you forward alone. And the deeper truth? He was never the destination. He was the mirror that showed you where you abandoned yourself, the mirror that triggered every unhealed belief, the mirror that helped you find your way back to your own wholeness. And now, as you step forward, something magical happens. You stop orbiting his frequency. You become your own sun. And whether he rises to meet you or not, you no longer dim. You no longer perform softness to be more digestible. You no longer shape your light to fit his shadow. You no longer carry the story that you need to shrink to be loved. Because the divine feminine, who remembers who she is, doesn't wait. She walks. She leads. She lives. And if he is meant to be by her side, he will choose that path. Not because she waited for him, but because she inspired him. And that is the difference. Waiting says, I will stop my life until you're ready. Walking says, I will live my truth, and if you are ready, you'll find me there. So now, you walk. Not away from him, but toward yourself, toward your joy, toward your soul's mission, toward the life you've always known you were meant to live, with or without his arrival. And in doing so, you open a portal. Not a portal of hope, but a portal of embodiment. The masculine may feel it, he may awaken, he may finally see what you've always seen, but that's no longer your job to manage. Because your journey is not about convincing someone to rise. It's about being the living embodiment of what rising looks like. And now, you are. No more waiting, no more hoping, no more circling timelines that drain your light. Just truth, just alignment, just you in full bloom. And that is more than enough. How the masculine begins to face himself. It never starts with words. It starts with silence. Not the silence he gives to you, but the silence that echoes back inside him when you're no longer there to fill it. That silence becomes a mirror, a pressure, a haunting. Because when the feminine stops waiting, when she stops reaching, bending, softening for him to feel safe in his denial, he has no choice but to meet the one presence he's been avoiding all along, himself. And facing himself is not poetic. It is brutal. It is disorienting. Because for the divine masculine, self-confrontation does not begin with reflection. It begins with collapse. The structure of his identity starts to crack. The distractions lose their grip. The old roles no longer satisfy. Everything he used to escape with, the noise, the people, the pride, begins to feel hollow. Because her absence is not just physical, it's vibrational. She's not angry, she's not punishing, she's just no longer available for illusion. And when her presence is no longer available to regulate him energetically, he starts to feel the weight of everything he suppressed, the guilt, the longing, the fear, the failure. At first, he resists it. He tells himself she was too intense. He repeats the story that he needed space. He scrolls through false validations. He distracts, he flirts, he works, he runs, but none of it sticks. Because nothing in his external world matches the depth of what she stirred in him, and the deeper truth begins to rise, not through thought, but through breakdown. Sleep becomes shallow. His body feels heavier. The emotions hit in waves he can't explain. He begins to question. Why does peace feel unreachable now? Why do her memories carry both ache and comfort? Why does he feel like a ghost in a world he once ruled? And that's when the shift begins. When the masculine begins to face himself, it is not a choice made in pride. It is a reckoning that arrives when the illusion of control crumbles. He doesn't just miss her, he realizes he abandoned himself by pushing her away. Because her presence wasn't just a woman's love, it was the vibration of truth calling him into his next form. And now that she's no longer holding the mirror, he must become the mirror for himself. He begins to see how many times he stayed silent instead of speaking love. How many times he pushed her away instead of saying, I'm scared. How often he chose safety over soul. This is the sacred breaking. It is not about punishment, it is about purification. And in this phase, he is stripped bare, not just of her presence, but of every mask he wore to avoid feeling unworthy. It is lonely. It is raw. It is holy. Because only in that quiet space does he hear the truth that she always embodied. Love does not wait forever. Love moves, love becomes. And if he does not rise, he will lose more than her. He will lose himself. So he sits in silence, in ache, in memory. He may not speak it aloud yet. He may still be on his knees inside while standing tall on the outside. But inside, something irreversible has begun. The pride starts to fall. The ego trembles. The boy who was afraid begins to fade. And the man who wants to love fully begins to breathe. He starts to remember what it felt like to be safe in her presence. Not because she rescued him, but because she saw him. And that memory becomes his compass. He stops blaming. He starts listening to the inner tremors, the old wounds, the hidden truths. He revisits the moments he dismissed too quickly. He replays the way she said goodbye, not with bitterness, but with finality. And he feels it now. She didn't leave him. She left the version of him that couldn't meet her. And now, he must meet himself. Not to win her back, not to prove anything, but because his soul is tired of the distance. And this is where the divine masculine begins to transform. Not in loud declarations, but in the quiet rebuilding. He may cry for the first time in years. He may write what he never said. He may speak to her in dreams before he dares to in life. And slowly, he stops running from what he once feared: intimacy, truth, depth, love that requires the all of him. Because he sees now, the feminine was never asking for perfection. She was asking for presence, for ownership, for truth. And now, finally, he wants to give that, not because she's demanding it, but because the silence has taught him what words never could, that to face her again, he must first face himself. And this time, he's beginning to look deeply, painfully, honestly, because he knows the next time he sees her, he cannot arrive as the boy who once ran. He must arrive as the man who chose to stay. There is a moment before reunion that no one warns you about. A moment where everything is still, everything is silent, but you can feel it. Something is cracking open in the unseen. It's not a message, not a call, not a sign you can screenshot or share. It's a trembling in the field, a vibration moving through your bones before sound ever reaches your ears. This is when the silence starts to break, not through his voice, but through the shift in your soul. Because the truth is, the masculine doesn't speak first with words. He speaks through energy, through presence, through hesitation that finally softens into courage. And before he knocks on your door, his essence begins to show up in places you didn't expect. You feel his frequency entering your space again, not as intrusion, but as resonance. A familiar hum you thought you had finally released, now returning, not to haunt, but to mirror how far you've come. You don't chase it, you don't resist it, you simply feel it. And in that quiet space, where you are no longer waiting, but anchoring, no longer reaching, but receiving, you begin to hear what cannot be said. He's moving, not in the way the world expects, not in sudden grand gestures, but in soul movements, subtle, sincere, surrendered. Because something is happening within him that's louder than any apology could ever be. And you, divine feminine, you feel it. Not because you need it, but because you're now the space that allows it. That's what changes everything. You are no longer the woman looking out the window. You are the one lighting the fire in the center of your temple. You're not chasing reunion. You've become reunion. And that's why his soul hears you louder than ever, even in silence. Because you stopped needing to be chosen. You chose yourself. You walked through the ache. You alchemized every unanswered message, every ignored moment, every cold silence into sacred strength. You turned longing into wholeness. You transmuted heartbreak into clarity. And now, you're not asking for love. You are the vibration of it, and that is what pulls him out of hiding. Not your pain, not your waiting, not your tears, your embodiment, your stillness, your peace. Because peace is what disturbs the masculine most when he is still fragmented. Not anger, not disappointment, not even silence. But the unwavering calm of a feminine who no longer makes herself small to be understood. And when he feels that, he can't unfeel it. It disrupts his sleep. It interrupts his pride. It stirs something ancient in his chest, something that remembers what it means to be seen without earning it, to be loved without performing for it. That's when he begins to rise. Not to possess, not to impress, but to meet. To stand in front of the woman who never needed to speak louder, because her soul always spoke first. So when the silence breaks, and it won't be with fireworks. It will be with breath, with softness, with something real. A moment of stillness between heartbeats where you both recognize you've always been speaking. You just had to remove the noise to hear it. He may not say the perfect thing. He may not show up the way you scripted in your mind, but when the silence breaks, you'll know, because his energy won't come to take. It will come to mirror, to hold, to see. And even if words stumble, the truth won't. Because reunion isn't about saying the right thing. It's about being the right frequency. And you, Divine Feminine, have become exactly that. So stay here, not in the waiting, but in the knowing. He's hearing it now. The silence is breaking, not with sound, but with soul. And whether his mouth has formed the words or not, his spirit is already speaking. It's saying, I feel you. I see you. I'm coming home to the version of you that no longer waits, because she became the destination. The silence was never empty. It was the womb of the new beginning. And now the beginning is near. Your peace became the portal. Your surrender became the call. Your presence became the answer. The silence is breaking, and love is about to speak.